All right, so we are live. We got our second live in a row with Dr. Wiersma. So Dr. Wiersma, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you started, how you became who you are.
I'm starting my 16th year at Cal State Fullerton. It's crazy that I've been here that long. I just remember moving into my first apartment and thinking I was never going to survive that first year. I grew up in Northern California. I was a swimmer growing up. I swam in college up at Washington State, and then I did all of my graduate work back east at Springfield College in Massachusetts. Taught for 1 year in New Jersey at Montclair State, and then the Fullerton job opened up, and I came out here for my interview, and I said, I'm never, ever moving away from Southern California if I get this job. I asked to fly out early. I went to the beach. I went to Huntington. Like the day before my interview, I said, I got to nail this thing so I can live here. And then I've worked with USA Swimming since 2003. I joined their sports medicine network, and I've worked with teams and national team athletes in Southern California since that time. And I'm currently in my little home office slash
music room
making bad music.
All right, Albert, you want to take away the first question?
Well, I know process is important. So how important is goal setting, a daily goal for improving from your perspective? I mean, I'm coming from a point of ignorance. My specialty isn't sports psychology. So what do you do about pushing the process and encouraging athletes to use the process to ultimately reach whatever their ultimate goal is?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about like the difference between like high-level athletes, lower-level athletes, people who set goals for exercise purposes. I mean, you have to keep in mind, depending on the level that you're at, sometimes goal setting is not even needed. When you talk about athletes who are at elite levels, their goals have been set for them many, many years ago. It's unbelievable how many athletes you'll hear about. For example, Josh Pruneau. Josh got a silver medal this year in the 200 breast. When he was 9 years old, he sat down with his parents and his coach and said, I want to make an Olympic team. And he's not the kid who just, every kid says, I want to make an Olympic team. Like, this kid knew it. He had a plan, and they held him to that. So when he was growing up and he wanted to skip practice, or he wanted to, they held that dangling in front of him for 12 years or so, 13 years. And it was something at that level, at that kind of an athlete, where it sets itself, and they don't have to revisit that daily. They focus on other things. And then you have athletes who are at somewhat lower levels who, the greatest mistake, as you probably know with goal setting, is you spend some time planning your goals and thinking about what you want to do. You meet with the coach on those goals. You maybe even display them somewhere. But, unless those things drive you on a daily basis, goal setting is not a terribly effective thing. And, there are actually times where I think focusing on your goals actually hinders your performance. If you're in the middle of a really hard training season and it feels like there's not a whole lot of end in sight, then man, just looking at those goals and thinking about what it would be like to attain them, man, that's the time to do that. That should drive you. That should make it meaningful, the day-to-day work. And, it's not just, you never want to just survive. You want to thrive. You never just want to get through a training session. You never want to get through a training cycle. You want to thrive through it. And I think those are the times when goals can be very important. When goals can become actually a hindrance is when you go to a competition and you're thinking about your goals. Now you're focusing on the outcome. Now you're worrying about it. Now your mind is in the future. Now you set up these expectations. And man, so for example, Olympic trials this year, I do Skype and FaceTime with a lot of athletes, and there's this guy I was working with going into Olympic trials, and I said, where are your goals at? And so he was looking at his computer, and his goals were up here. It was about 3 weeks before. And I said, I want you to take them off your wall, and I want you to put them away now. Because your goals have gotten to this point now. Now we got to stop focusing on those and get into the day-to-day, get into managing the moment. So, I think it's really critical what you say about the process. And another thing I think that athletes and people who set goals need to constantly remind themselves is that today matters. Today matters, and training is cumulative. And what happens is if you have a long training season ahead of you, you think it's so far off that it really doesn't matter. But imagine, like, in class, you've got a final exam, and it's September, and your final exam is going to be in December. You don't really appreciate how important September 17th is, because you think, oh, well, I've got several months and I'll come back. But if you can appreciate how important September 17th is to what you're going to know on that final exam, you're going to be focusing on the day-to-day. You're going to be reviewing things when you need to. So I really do think that the key that you said is the process. And mindfulness right now it's almost annoyingly popular, to be honest with you. Everyone talks about mindfulness. Everyone talks about being in the moment. It's something that's extremely difficult to do. But I think that there's things that athletes and people who are training and exercising can do on a regular basis to be very mindful about the now and why this is so critical, not just your long-term goals, your short-term goals, just making the most out of the now. So, and I teach the applied sports psych class. We have a night on goal setting, and I think I surprise my students because I say this is my least favorite topic is goal setting. I think it's overdone. Everyone knows about SMART goals. There's so little exciting stuff about goal setting that's new, that I'm passionate about. It's so straightforward. But in that same class, undergrad students have a goal setting project, and they set a goal for the end of the semester, and everything they do during the semester, the mental skills they learn, they apply toward the pursuit of that goal. So it's a little bit paradoxical. On the one hand, I'm saying goal setting is critically important, and it's a huge part of this class. On the other side, I'm saying I hate lecturing on it because it's boring. So if you guys have any ideas of making that, I don't know, new and exciting, I'd love to hear them. But to me, not a whole lot that hasn't been said about goal setting that these students, especially grad students coming in this class, aren't going to know about already.
You're on the topic of school. How would you go about, becoming a sports psychologist consultant? What steps do they need? What credentials do they need?
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. Probably not as much as, the CSCS has, I think, a gold standard of certification. Our certifying body is ASP. It's the Advancement of Applied Sports Psychology, Association of Applied Sports Psych, and it's the governing body of our field, and you get certified through it, and there's 2 levels. There's the master's level certification you can get, there's the doctoral level certification you can get. Very similar to the CSCS, you have to take a series of courses to prepare. You need to be certified, or you need to be, supervised by somebody who's certified. You need to be attending an accredited program like Cal State Fullerton's is. But, unlike strength and conditioning, getting the hours and getting the experience in sports psych can be pretty tough. There's a very strong component of sports psychology that's based in research, and it's important that we do research on it and read the latest research on it. But there's also a huge applied component that a lot of students don't really have an opportunity to get very well. Everyone can go to a master's program or a PhD program and do research, but having people who can supervise you, who can put you in those situations, is another thing. And I think actually that's one of the strongest things about our program at Fullerton is you've got people like Dr. Statler Dr. Becker, myself, who we're out in the field doing it. We invite our students to observe. We put students in internships where they get to practice this stuff hands-on, and that's a really critical part of it. Unlike strength and conditioning, where there seems to be a fairly high demand and a lot of what major university doesn't have a staff of strength and conditioning coaches, sports psych is still not to that stage, and I don't think it's because people don't appreciate it. I think that there's funding. I think there's a lot of reasons, and there is still some old school. Some people still don't believe that sports psych is a legitimate sports science, or there's still some coaches who think if the athletes can't handle it, then we don't want them there. The strongest athletes are going to rise to the top, so we don't need to invest in the sports psych stuff. It's changing, I think. There was a time in our field where you would never publicly say that you were working with a sports psych consultant because the stigma was, oh, well, there must be something wrong with you psychologically, or it's a sign of mental weakness. And we've long gone beyond that point. I mean, you could look up the majority of Olympic teams or Olympic athletes that probably worked with a sports psych person, talk about it publicly about how much it was helpful. So we're going beyond that. Unfortunately, it hasn't really translated right now into the type of job opportunities that there are available for other people in sports science. So, it's going to an accredited school, getting your supervised hours, becoming certified. Those are actually some of the easiest things, but getting full-time employment is still pretty tough. And I hope it changes for sure, but so far it looks like probably going into academia, which is what most of my colleagues have done, has been a surefire way of having a consistent paycheck, but also then having the freedom and flexibility to do the consulting outside of your job and being exposed to a lot of athletes in the process of that.
So are you seeing, because even in the field of strength and conditioning, there are still some sport coaches who, don't even fully trust strength and conditioning coaches. And do you find that with sports psychology too, that there's still some sport colleges or sport coaches not fully thinking sports psychology is truly something worth?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation with age of the coach. Mm-hmm. Most of your younger coaches, particularly if they have gone through their sport, most of them are coming out and really seeking it. I do think that if you were kind of the older school ilk, when sports psych was considered to be just similar, that athletes with clinical issues went to go speak with somebody, I think that there's still a lot of convincing that needs to be done. But I will say, though, I think that probably, with this wave of younger coaches who now are coaching professional teams, coaching Olympic teams, they're bringing with it an appreciation for this area that I think it's just going to move it forward. And the most successful experiences I've had working with teams is where a coach who was a very successful athlete, him or herself, when they introduce it, they sell it. They believe in it. They want to be at all the meetings with the athletes. If I have a coach who wants to work with a sports psych person, but they're not going to be at the meetings with the team, I'm not going to work with that team because it sends a message that this isn't important enough for me to be there. And I think that the coaches, and if you're watching this and you're a coach, you're really the person who's going to sell it. I won't sell it initially. It takes time for me to build trust. It takes time for me to understand the culture. But if you have a coach who has been to the Olympics or has played at the professional level, who can sell it right from the start, man, the team is going to buy in a lot earlier. And those I think, are sometimes some of the younger coaches who are a lot more willing to do that. And plus, a lot of the older coaches, when they played, they never had access to that stuff, and they don't fully, I don't think, really truly understand what it is that we can do and what we can bring to a team.
So as a rule, do these teams reach out to you then, or is it just you get word of mouth and they approach you, or is it, how does it work generally? I mean, you work with several teams.
You know, it's almost in every way. You know, I'll get referred. A coach will get my contact information and reach out. And I think what happens too is, you know, if somebody has really been a good model for how this should look and work, then a lot of coaches are going to want to seek that and want to come find that. And so, and then you start building your own success, and then you, I think, start building reputation. But, you know, a really big part of that too is being able to speak the language, understanding not just the sports psych behind performance, but, you know, I think I'm very blessed to be at a place like Cal State Fullerton where I interact daily with faculty and grad students in all these different areas of sports science. I think that's a huge benefit of going through a kinesiology department and getting sports science trained sports psych, as opposed to going through a psychology department and not being exposed to that on a daily basis. Knowing the language, you know, knowing the type of equipment that these athletes are using, knowing the type of language that their coaches and strength coaches are giving them. And I do think that's actually can be a major benefit of going the sports science route in sports psych. I think the coaches and the players tend to trust you a little bit more, that you really truly understand the bigger picture of what it takes to train. But I don't have a website. You know, if you Google my name, I don't know what you're going to find, but you're not going to find, I don't sell my services at all. I've never had to promote. And, you know, if I was doing this on my own, you better believe I'd be hitting social marketing and I'd be hitting all that stuff. But, you know, I really do feel having a stable job like at Fullerton allows me to say yes to the situations that I want to do, and also say no to a lot of situations that wouldn't be a good fit for me either. Because, you know, I've got my salary, I've got my life, and so everything I commit to is I research it very heavily. I spend a lot of time meeting with the coach or coaches and coaching staff, and if it's not a good fit, I don't need to commit to doing it. Whereas other people who are doing this alone, they have to say yes to a lot that they probably don't want to.
So are you?
So you're known as being really competitive, Dr. Wiersma. I don't know if you know that you have the reputation for that. So if it were Jacks, you'd probably want to win at Jacks.
Yep.
I guess the question I would ask is that a characteristic of people that are successful, or can people compartmentalize where they could be really competitive in one area and not necessarily as competitive in another area? Or is it across the board that level of competitiveness works for you?
It's a great question. If what you're doing you tie into your self-concept, it's hard to turn it off. But if I'm going to engage in a competitive game of something that either, you know, I shouldn't be good at or I have never really invested in, then I'll want to win for sure. But if I lose, it doesn't bother me as much as if I'm doing something that I should be good at, I should be competitive at. So I'll give an example. I am very competitive. I play tennis every week, and I've never played tennis before. I've never had a lesson before. I've been playing for 3 years now. And I play against a guy who's been playing tennis most of his life. But, you know, I want to go into those games, and I want them to be close. And, you know, I'm going to be playing him next week, and if I drop one, I'm not going to think about it when I leave. Because tennis isn't, it's a way for me to be fit. It's a way for me to learn new skills. I don't need to be good at tennis, right? So if I don't do well or if I lose, I'm not going to be bothered by it. But if it's something that's important to me, God, I hate to lose. And I'll tell you, this is interesting because I was recently speaking to an athlete who's in Rio, playing a team sport, and was getting really frustrated with officiating and overreacted, made some stupid decisions out of anger. And so we're talking, and this athlete is trying to explain it as, I hate to lose. I hate to lose. And if I feel like I'm being mistreated, if I feel like the odds are stacked up against me, I hate it. And I said to him, the most successful athletes, and I think business people or whatever competitive, you've got two options. You love to win or you hate to lose. What do you think is the biggest factor? What do you think is more important to a competitive athlete, a successful athlete? Love to win or hate to lose? Which one? Give it a shot.
Lose.
Don't guess if you don't know.
I don't know.
Hate to lose. Hate to lose. Hate to lose. That's a much stronger motivator to elite athletes than liking winning. And I'm with the coach recently. He was a 3-time Olympian. He's had a very successful coaching career. I'm on a team trip. One of the assistant coaches is driving a different van. I'm driving the van that this coach is in. The assistant coach is in a faster lane and passes us and is going to beat us to lunch. He is pissed because we're losing. He was upset that we were losing in what wasn't even a race. We were just going to get there after the assistant coach, but he hated it. He hated it. He was pissed. That would have been a much stronger visceral response than us getting there first and him getting out of the van going, oh, we won. It wasn't even close. He was much more upset about losing than he would have been happy about winning. Now, I haven't seen much empirical evidence about this, but I believe very firmly that competitiveness, there's something about that just feeling of not losing that drives. I don't know if you watch a lot of the swimming stuff, but Michael Phelps was a great example of when he was in the ready room and Chalakos was doing that whole thing and getting under Michael's skin. Michael would have been far more pissed if he lost to him than he was happy at beating him, if that makes sense. And, competitiveness is a double-edged sword, too. Being so competitive that it does not enable you to control your emotions in the moment could be a really bad thing, for sure. So, anyway, great question. Did I even answer that question? Did I answer the question? I don't even remember the question.
I think you did.
Okay. All right.
All right. So I have you've got some viewers, Dr. Wiersma, and I got some questions for you too.
Okay.
So the first one is, Dr. Wiersma, do you believe the exposure from the Olympics is giving the appropriate view of what sports psychology really is?
I think that there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that people don't understand that I'm not sure if it does. I do know that there's been an awful lot of exposure to it. So, for example, during the men's volleyball, they've made reference to Dr. Becker several times about her background in sports psych and the asset. When you watch women's volleyball, especially beach volleyball, they've referenced Michael Gervais, who's a sports psych working with that team. I think that it's getting a lot of exposure for athletes who are dealing with it. I'm not sure, though, because the commentators themselves, I don't think they're painting an accurate picture of the pressure. So, you look at an athlete who is expected to win. Let's say, an American gymnast who goes to Rio, and the only thing that she can do is win. I don't think people understand the pressure that type of an athlete carries with, you have to win a gold medal. And you could get injured. The judges can be, there's so many things that can happen with that athlete that it's painted as such, oh, she's expected to win the gold medal or he's expected to win the gold medal. I don't think people recognize how much pressure that athlete still carries in some cases far more than someone who might get second or third, because the weight of the world wasn't on their shoulders. And then the backstories of the stuff that you never hear is pretty incredible. So this was in the news, so I can say it publicly, but Adam Krikorian is the head coach of the women's water polo team. The USA women are on their way. You know, they're the heavy favorite to win the gold. Adam's brother, right before the start of the games, was surfing up in San Francisco and gets out of the waters, removing his wetsuit, has a heart attack, and dies in the spot. And Adam's in a situation now where he's already in Rio. The team is focused. All the pressure's on them to win it. And then, you know, he gets a call in the Olympic Village, or he gets a text from his father saying, "Call me now." And, you know, what that can do to a team, you know, behind the scenes. People heard later that his brother died, but you don't know what type of decisions to make in the moment. What if he stays in Rio? What if he goes home? What if, you know, what's more important? And, you know, that kind of backstory, I think that, you know, on that world stage, I'm not sure that people will ever truly understand all that goes on behind the scenes. And two, you know, you look at making an Olympic team. You know, I work a lot in swimming. Olympic trials is probably a more competitive meet than the Olympics are. We're several deep in some events that, you know, third or fourth Olympic trials for America could have medaled. So you make the Olympic team, and then you have to go again. You know, you got to go to training camp. You've got to get processes, all the distractions. You know, that month period between Olympic trials and leaving for Rio could have been a huge distraction for some of these athletes, many of whom did everything they could to make the team, and now there's kind of like, now I have to do this again. So there's a lot of stuff that I think goes on behind the scenes that people probably don't really understand about how much pressure there is and how much goes on. But I know though that it does pique people's interest, and I know that my sports psych classes this semester, there's going to be a ton of stories that students are going to bring in the classroom, you know, whereas the other 3 years I feel like I've got to go find the stuff for them because they're not paying attention, but they're paying attention now. So, you know, the first night of my applied sports psych class this semester, it's going to be an open forum on what they've seen and the stories they've heard, and it's going to be pretty exciting to have all that.
And the second question I have is, what do you think the outlook for the sports psych job market for students that may be at a crossroads in kinesiology or in the psychology field?
It's getting better, and I think people who want to go the traditional sports psych route and work with athletes should be open to working with other performance domains. So the military right now, not just right now, they've been doing this now for the last 20 years, but in the last probably 10, they've devoted a significant amount of resources and money to hire people to work with the military in sports psychology skills. And we've been kind of a feeder program for students to go and get their degrees and then go back and work at schools like West Point and work with the U.S. Army. That's an example of a whole area of employment that is technically using sports psych skills, but you're doing it on not a traditional athlete, so to speak. You know, I think ballets, I know Cirque du Soleil, I know there's all these other performance domains who are seeking the skills that we use in sports psych. If I'm a young up-and-coming student and I have the crossroads and I have a whole career in front of me and I'm interested in sports psych, I'm going to leave myself open to the possibility of working outside of sport using sports psych skills. Businesses are hiring people for sports psych. It's a lot of leadership and maybe organizational psych stuff, but you know, there's a lot of different domains that see the benefit of this stuff that I think that younger people coming up probably want to at least keep in their back pocket as potential areas. I think too, times have changed quite a bit. Where when I went through and I got my doctorate in sports psych, I took classes in clinical psych. I took classes in counseling psych, but I was never a licensed psychologist. I'm not qualified to work with athletes and clinical issues. I think now that's something that sports psych students probably need to consider, is maybe going the route of getting some type of licensure on top of sports psych. There's a huge emphasis right now on student mental health in the NC2A. So NC2A programs who are hiring sports psych people are hiring people who have backgrounds in mental health, so they can work with student athletes on clinical issues outside of the sport. That's definitely a trend that students need to consider, maybe a dual kind of maybe coursework in both clinical or counseling psych and also in kinesiology. But I think it's exciting. I think most national governing bodies, USA Volleyball, USA Soccer, I think they're hiring sports psych people. Major League Baseball, you're going to find a full-time sports psych person probably at 3/4, maybe 4/5 of Major League Baseball has hired somebody. It's exciting. I think there's more opportunities now than there were when I came into it, which I'm really happy for. I think getting a PhD is going to be a key, though. I think students who go through the master's program, some are getting hired, but I think the real opportunities are going to be going to those who are going to maybe go on.
So staying on the topic of Rio and sports psychology, so how do you prepare, what techniques do you use to help the athlete prepare for anything? So, especially with the way Brazil's going right now with the random green pool, the burglaries, all that kind of stuff. How do you prepare for those type of situations, the uncontrollables, essentially?
Yep. What a lot of that has to do with is energy management and emotional control. The two are inseparable. When I experience an emotion, it comes at the cost of some energy. What I need to be able to do is I need to be able to recognize when I'm becoming emotional about something, and the higher the degree of emotion I'm experiencing, the more mental or physical energy that's going to cost me. Now I have less to give. Now there's more in my mind than I need to. So emotional control is a huge thing. I'm going to show you, I don't know if this is going to come up again or not, but I'm going to show you this graphic. As a matter of fact, I texted this tonight to a wrestler who's competing tomorrow as a reminder. So let me see if I can.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's a little pressure gauge I came up with. And you'll see that there's a green section in the middle, and then there's a red section, there's a yellow section. Okay? If you could just kind of keep that graphic in mind. Imagine like a pressure gauge, like if you're pulling up a bicycle, the needle moves with how much pressure it's experiencing. From an emotional perspective, when I use the phrase being centered emotionally, I mean being in a state like you and I are in right now. We're in control of our emotions, we're relatively calm, we're rational, we're not experiencing an extreme of positive or negative. And if we can stay emotionally centered in anything we do, we'll perform our best. If you're extremely nervous for an exam, you're probably going to be not doing as well in the exam as if you were calm and in control. So the context is emotional center is the place you want to be. Now, what you also want to do is you want to avoid emotional highs or lows. In the course of a training session, in the course of a competition, the more emotional highs and lows you experience, you're expending energy. It's very difficult to keep your mind on the task at hand if the emotions are clouding your thoughts. So I have a phrase that I use with athletes that is to stay centered, meaning recognizing when you start to react to a situation positively or negatively, and bringing it back to center so you don't experience the cost that comes with. So if you walk into the pool and you see the water is green, for example, the example you gave, then that's likely to lead to fears or doubts or concerns, things that are out of your control. Now you're perseverating on those things. Now something that's a relatively minor thing, you blow out of proportion into a major thing. And it's really hard to be prepared to focus on stretching, warming up, if your mind is on that negative thing. Your muscles start to get tight, your heart rate goes up, your mind is cluttered with negative thoughts. All these things go on. And you don't have to be a physiologist to understand that that has a toll. It has a toll. So, you know, if you're playing it next game and the game before you goes into triple overtime and you've already warmed up 45 minutes ago and now you're sitting watching and you're allowing yourself to shift all over the place, then you can really quickly start to spiral. Now, centered also means that there's another side of the equation. That's experiencing emotional highs or excitement. That comes at a cost, and that can be dangerous. You know, your team goes up 3-4 goals, and so you start to experience excitement. And then what happens when the other team scores 1 or 2 in a row? You don't just come to here, you go all the way back to that other side, and it's a huge cost. So I'll give an example of the importance of staying centered. I work with a lot of the open water swimmers, and to make a national team or to make an Olympic team during an Olympic year, you have to place high enough at nationals that are in national competition. So in swimming in a 10K event, a 10-kilometer swim lasts for about 2 hours. And you could be neck and neck for 2 hours, and it all comes down to the last stroke. You know, there have been national championships where the distance between the first and the 8th place person was within hundredths of a second. All those people hitting that finish line at the same time. So let's say you're trying to make a national team and you need to place top 6 at nationals. If you make a national team, you get free travel, you get health insurance, you get a stipend, you get to train at the Olympic Training Center anytime you want. You get a lot of benefits. So let's say you're 50 meters from the shore and you're in 5th place. And you start to think about making the national team. You start to get excited. Next thing you know, you shift your focus, 2 or 3 people at the very end touch ahead of you. Now you're 7th or 8th. And now you have nothing because you allowed your mind to shift and to react to the energy and the emotion that comes with that. So I talk an awful lot about the importance of recognizing when our emotions are starting to shift us from center, and then working on ways that you can bring yourself back so it doesn't come at the cost. And I watch sports with a very different lens than most people do. You know, you look at the Golden State Warriors this year. You know, they had a dream season. They had an unbelievable series against Kansas City. No doubt at any time were they going to make it to the NBA final. They played with confidence. It doesn't matter how far they were down. They stayed center. They played their game. Then they go in the final, and they're playing against Cleveland, and they start reacting to everything, and then they think the officials are against them, and now you take a guy like Steph Curry, who's the model of emotional control all season long, and he falls apart. And look what happens to the team. That emotional control thing can take arguably one of the best teams in the history of the NBA and amount them to a situation where they absolutely collapse. So, you know, this notion of no matter what happens, I need to make sure that I'm managing the moment so I'm not wasting energy, I'm not turning little things into big things. I need to keep reminding myself that staying centered is such an important part. When coaches use that language, when teammates use that language with each other, then it's really easy to catch yourself and to come back with where you need to be. And there's no way those athletes in divers or water polo players could have ever thought that they'd run into a situation where the pool is going to be a different color than they've ever performed in before. So what? It is. And guess what? You're diving in the same color water as every other opponent, and if you can not react to that and you can get yourself mentally through that, that can actually be an advantage for you. I want the water to be black. I want there to be shark fins swimming around the water so that my opponents are going to freak out about it, and I'm going to do my thing, and I'm probably going to be successful as a result of that. I can use that disadvantage to my advantage. And if athletes hear that message enough going into it, then I think that they're going to put themselves in a situation to where almost literally anything can happen, and they can control themselves when the environment is uncontrollable.
How about athletes that purposely want to, let's talk to the people that talk smack, the people that psychologically they just want to mess with you.
Yep.
How do you prepare for someone like that who's a notorious, like, is it Reggie Miller versus the Knicks, where he was just getting in people's heads? He was just driving them crazy.
Yep.
Because it's almost a superpower to talk smack.
Yeah. An athlete has to know that how they handle that situation has no influence at all on their masculinity, on their ability to stand up for themselves. They have to separate what that person is trying to do from, oh, I need to stand up, I need to fight back. They have to separate those things, because it's not about me. It's about that person. And I often talk about the game within the game. The game is basketball. The game within the game is all that crap that goes on. And if you lose that game within the game, you're probably not going to win the game. And so what's more important to you? You want to think that you can win that little game. Sorry. Tequila usually helps. Do you want to play that little battle and let that person get in your mind and react to that person? Because if you go down that route, you're going to lose that game. Because you've just given your control to that person. That's what that person wanted. And when you lost that game, the big game is over. And I think most athletes who are susceptible to the trash talk and to their ego, I think when they start seeing the bigger picture, then they're a lot more likely to be able to not respond. And, you know, I work with water polo players a lot. Water polo is an extremely physical game. It's a very emotional game. It's a very mental game. And I'll tell you, know, people in water polo have grown up their whole lives fighting back, playing that game. And they get to a certain level where there's somebody like me and hopefully a coaching staff saying, you're not going to respond. You're not going to react to that. It ain't going to happen. And I think it takes a while for them to understand that it has nothing to do with their masculinity or their manliness that they don't fight back, and it's everything to do with they're going to win that game because they're going to win the bigger game. And then I'll tell you what, when you got these big fat rings to account for it, you're a lot more likely to deal with that and say, I don't need to play that because I got the fat ring. You know what I mean? And that's a huge benefit when an athlete can start to see that they don't have to react to that. And I'll tell you, you know, I can sell the message all I want, but until athletes start to really buy into it and start to share that language with each other and keep each other in check when they want to retaliate, that's a huge, huge thing for a tool, a weapon for someone to have. So, you know, if you're that competitive, you can't lose that little game in the game, because if you do, you're going to lose the bigger one. So there's a cost to everything. You choose where you want that investment to go and that cost to go.
So what do you do? What do you do? Take your mind off stuff.
Say it, I couldn't hear what she said. Sorry.
What do you do in your free time?
Who,
Other
me?
than working in sports psychology and working at Cal State Fullerton, what do you do for fun?
I love to surf. I am a big outdoors person. I spent a significant chunk of time this summer when I was not working, camping, backpacking. I work out myself. I have this very expensive hobby that Albert's come over and he's engaged at our last barbecue we had. I think you were at that barbecue. But I'll tell you what. It's such a cliche to say if you do what you love to do, you'll never work a day in your life. It's such a cliche. I really do feel like I have that type of profession where I don't get a lot of free time. I just don't. And so, I've got consulting. I work at UCLA. I've got my full-time gig at Fullerton. I've got grad students. I've got it just, I picked up a couple more UFC fighters today. It's just like I do so much stuff. I travel a lot with work, but it literally feels like I'm not working. I mean, to be able to spend time with these athletes who are just amazing people and to be in an environment where people are willing to risk everything for something they love is quite remarkable. So, I'm heading into now the school year where I'm looking at my schedule and I don't know if I have a weekend off until fall break, and I love it. I really, truly enjoy the work. But, when I'm not doing it, I have my hobbies. I love to read. I've got my dog here. We do a lot of outdoor stuff together, and it's a really important part. Another thing that I'm pretty good at is
photography.
No. I know when to turn my mind off of the work stuff because you deal with athletes who are dealing with all kinds of situations, and it'd be very easy for me to take those things, for example, and lay in bed at night thinking about, oh, I should have said this, maybe I should do this. That's no way to live your life. And so I am able to know when to turn that off so that I can pick up that guitar and really be in the moment with that guitar, or go hiking and really be in the moment in nature. And I think that's something that is probably more important than having the free time, is to use the time that you do have free, be fully engaged in it. Albert, you mentioned photography, man. I'll tell you, I have not gotten my camera out lately, although these phone cameras, a friend of mine works at Apple, and he said this is the best camera in the world. And it's pretty unbelievable the type of stuff you can do with these little phone cameras. But
you got to put it on a tripod, too, if you want to do the long exposure stuff, though.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I did bust out my real camera this summer, and I got some pretty cool shots with it. But
I think I liked them. So I'm going to ask you about some MMA stuff, because I follow Eddie Bravo. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a big jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah.
And he describes some of his fights as almost like play. So he plays with them because he thinks he gets them out of their game by he doesn't want to make them angry because he doesn't want. But he's a really high level black belt guy.
Yep.
So, is there something to that, or is there a characteristic that your MMA guys are going to approach a fight differently based on their strengths or weaknesses, or is there just like a general this is the mentality you should have going in?
Well, it's a lot easier if you're doing one of the disciplines to have that type of attitude that he described. If you're only boxing, if you're only doing jiu-jitsu, if you're only doing kickboxing, then you can prepare for those disciplines singularly. And even though all those disciplines, there's a lot going on, the game changes a lot when you get into a mixed martial art, because now you've got all kinds of angles that you have to be prepared for in the moment. And I think MMA guys are getting really smart now, because typically, and I haven't followed MMA for too long, but I think in the past, if an athlete had a strength, maybe it was their ground game, maybe it was striking, maybe it was kicking, then you kind of knew what to expect with that athlete. They'd work on these other disciplines, but you knew that you were going to get a person's discipline that they were really good at. And one of the most amazing things today is you take an athlete who you expect to they're going to go for the ground game, and all of a sudden they're striking, like unbelievably striking. That's the level of commitment now that it's going to require. That if you have a weakness discipline, I don't see how you're going to make it in the future, because everything has become so refined and integrated. And I think that's actually what makes mixed martial arts particularly challenging from the mental perspective, is to be able to process all that information about what's happening and what could happen at any given moment in the cage. You don't have time to be reacting to emotions. All that emotional control stuff that I talked about, all the focus stuff to talk about, I love the line that, if a boxer loses his focus, he gets immediate feedback. You get hit right in the face. And it's like that in these times 8 in these mixed martial arts competitions, that, you really do have to manage the moment and process so much information at the same time that you cannot be reflecting on a past mistake. You can't let anger enter your mind. And the preparation for that is quite challenging. One of the things that I will work with an athlete on, we'll talk about when we're arranging a time to meet, if it's a UFC fighter. I meet with my grappling coach, and then I meet with my striking coach, and I meet with my weight person, and they've got in the course of a week, they're meeting with 6 disciplines. And my biggest advice with that is, when you're boxing, that's all you're thinking of. Don't think about the other disciplines that you need to be training for right now. You only think about boxing right now. Because I think they can be pretty overwhelming in mixed martial arts to be feeling like they have to be doing all of it at one time. But the corollary to that, though, is, I worked with a fighter recently, and I go watch him train, and when he's sparring with somebody, that's all he's thinking about is sparring. And so I talked to his coach, because I'm not going to give any coaching advice ever. But I talked to the coach. I said, what I would do? I would have the guy he's sparring with, one time in that round, he gets to try and take him down. Because now, in the back of that fighter's mind, he's got to process more than just the sparring. Because that's what's going to happen in the real deal, is they have to be able to prepare for and defend 10 things that can happen at one time. But when you're only sparring in the moment, that's all you're thinking of. It doesn't train you to be conscious of looking for when the person's going to raise their knee or their ankle or whatever. So that's just a real challenge, I think, in martial arts, is just the amount of information they have to process, and being able to do it in a way that, they're both thinking of their game plan, but they're also prepared for what they think their opponent's going to bring, when often they bring something completely different. I have just a ton of respect for the men and women who train in mixed martial arts. It's unbelievable what they do.
So I have another who says hi, Robert Solana. But he wants to know if there are resources for coaches or parents to access to begin to foster mental skills.
Yeah, actually, the parenting piece is huge. First of all, most sport organizations will have resources for sports psych. Probably the best one, my favorite one, is written by the United States Olympic Committee. It's called the Mental Skills Training Manual. It's a series of worksheets that the staff at the Olympic Training Center, the sports psychologists, put together on imagery, self-talk, relaxation, and it's very, very athlete-focused. It uses the language of athletes. It's the USOC Mental Skills Training Manual. That's a great resource. You can go to teamusa.org and you can order it through there. They also have a companion manual for coaches So it gives coaches the language to help with things like self-talk and visualization. It's a great resource. They need to do one for parenting for sure. That's something that is huge. There's actually a relatively new book that just came out in youth sport, and I need to remember the exact name of it. I should know because I was a reviewer for it. I spent a lot of time with it. Youth Sports from Theory to Practice. Human Kinetics just published it. It's phenomenal, and it's a great resource related to children and parenting resources in sports psych.
What's the name of it again? Youth Sports?
Yeah. I think it's Youth Sports from Theory to Practice. I can double check. As a matter of fact, I'm tempted to look it up as we're talking, but I won't do that. I'll stay focused. Rob, you can stop by my office. I've got a big fat copy of it in my office. If you're welcome to come by and check it out.
So, is there an age in which when athletes should start training, or that they're ready? Because I know for strength and conditioning professionals, it's generally, is this kid coachable? Can I put them in a weight room and will they be safe? Is there an age at which you can start training these mental skills and make it an activity, or make it as part of a practice where it can actually be useful rather than just giving them a drill? And
yeah, Terry Orlick, O-R-L-I-C-K, Terry Orlick has really done a great job of taking applied sports psychology and making it useful for young children. Terry Orlick is up in Canada. He has worked with more Olympic teams than any other sports psych person on this planet. He's worked with, I believe, every summer and winter Canadian Olympic teams since the 1970s. Every single one. The guy's legit. But he also is very focused on bringing this towards children. If I were to ever take over the American school system, I'd have a mental skills class be required in first grade. Because there is no such thing as too early of a time to learn how to deal with adversity, to learn how to deal with failure, to learn how to focus. You know, so for example, this is one of Terry's things. I love it. You're coaching a youth soccer team. There's a tree, and the leaves are falling because it's September, October. So you have each player in your team go over and grab a leaf from the ground and come back and sit in a circle. And you give them 1 minute to focus on that leaf. The colors, the contours, where the shape, everything. Focus on it. And you have all those kids walk in the middle of the circle and drop the leaf in the middle, and then walk back and you throw all the leaves up and you say, now come find your leaf. And that takes an inordinate amount of focus to do, and kids can do it. And kids learn a lot from being attentive to their environment and knowing they can control things that seem like an impossible task. How in the world do you pick out one leaf out of 30? You can, if you learn how to focus. And, I could go on and on about the type of adversities that kids deal with today, anything from how quickly they're growing up via social media to, times have changed where they live in single-parent homes or both the parents are working and they're dealing with all kinds of adversities in their life. And, man, strength deals with different issues with young people, growth and development, than psych people do. But just like, you prep a young person with body weight exercises before they touch weights, similar thing is you prep young children to build these mental skills to deal with the type of crap that they're going to be dealing with as they get older. I mean, it's such a neglected aspect of sports psych because everybody wants to work with Olympic athletes and professional athletes. That's where all these people want to go, is work at that level for whatever reason. But man, you've got Youth Sports of America. You want to go get access, you go to the local park, high school, you can do this stuff. And so it's huge. And Terry Orlick has written You know, he wrote a great article called Mental Skills with Children in Sports and Life. Probably one of my favorite sports psych articles. But you know, that's another resource with kids. But I mean, I'm all for teaching math and English and geography in grade school. But when are we going to recognize that these kids are under enormous pressures, and all the skills of confidence and goal setting and all the stuff that we use as adults? Why not teach them that at a very young age? So anyway, that's sort of a soapbox of mine, but I'll step off of it for now.
What do you coaches get wrong about psychology? What do they just fundamentally not understand?
Who's this, you say?
Just coaches. What do they get wrong about sports psychology? What do they just don't get it?
Number one, they don't understand how important their role is in using the language on a day-to-day basis. Number two, they still think it's a problem-focused field. So if you're dealing with an issue, then you should go see someone in sports psych. Whereas that's backwards. Why not promote every athlete, no matter if you're struggling or at the top of your game, to get better at this stuff? And I think too many coaches still see it as a problem-focused thing. I don't think you'd ever want a coach to say, we're going to wait till you get weak in the weight room for you to go seek out a strength coach. But that still is unfortunately the model by which a lot of coaches work. And then two, don't send your athlete to me the night before a competition. That's not when the work is done. And, you know, it's just amazing how all of a sudden an event comes and some coaches or athletes think, oh, well, now I should be focusing on sports psych. No. You know, your competition's tomorrow. Where were you 2 months ago? You know, when the real work, it would be as asinine as someone saying, hey, Whitney, I got an athlete who's got a track race tomorrow. Do you think you can meet with her in the weight room today?
Yeah.
Same exact thing. So, you know, I still think that those are the type of things that some coaches still sort of, I don't think they quite get about the sports psych stuff, is just, you know, how important some of that stuff is. But also, there's people in my field who sell this stuff the wrong way too. You know, and they're promoting it as, when there's something wrong, come see me, or, you know, they're prone to showing, you know, using motivational quotes or videos, and so now, oh, that's all that sports psych is. Well, if that's all it was, you could go on right now to YouTube and find 24 motivational videos, and why don't you take my job? You know, you just, oh, this looks like a fun one. So, and I think a lot of people in my field sort of, that's how they also work. And so people come across as thinking, well, sports psychology is nothing more than, you know, knowing when to play the right music, or, you know, but it goes far beyond that, hopefully.
Yeah,
Did you ever have an athlete who you just had a breakthrough, and it was just, maybe they were fighting you most of the way, and then they just had an epiphany and they were all in? Is there any, can you think of an experience where you were able to really have that breakthrough where you were just like, well, he fought me the entire time, or nearly the entire time, but he really bought in, or she bought in? Is there, can you think of an occasion like that?
Yeah, I wish it happened more often. I would say probably one of my biggest success stories, when I first started working with the men's water polo team at UCLA, you know, you're trying to sell this language, you're trying to send this message. And there was a guy on the team who just wasn't buying it. This guy was just tough as nails, and he wore his emotions on his sleeve, and just so hard. And I thought, if I can get to the rest of the team, he's such a good player that if he doesn't buy in, you know, I think other people probably need it more than he does. So we're playing against Stanford, and we just dropped 2 games. This is 2 years ago. We just dropped a couple games, and we're playing at home against Stanford, and we scored 2 quick goals just after the half to go up. and the guys on the bench start celebrating. And he jumps up in front of everybody. Remember that graphic I showed you earlier? And he goes, "Stay center," to the whole bench. And I was like, holy shit, we're going to win it all. If this guy can buy in, the one guy I thought, there's no way he's buying it, if he starts using the language, oh, everybody's going to do it. And that was pretty special. So that was 2 years ago. Last year, we ran the table. We went undefeated. We won our second consecutive championship. And at the banquet, the seniors get up, they get a chance to talk, and that same athlete, I was thinking, he won't even probably acknowledge sports psych at all. And he gets up and he starts thanking the coaches, and he's not saying my name, which I didn't expect. And all of a sudden, he said the kindest, strongest support for sports psych I've ever heard an athlete say, and I was floored that this athlete had bought in so much, didn't show it, but he shared just how much it changed his life, both in the water and out of the water. And that was one of those times where you just don't think you're reaching him. He's too tough for this stuff. He's been successful without it, so to speak. But man, he was really using this stuff, and that was pretty cool to see. And also, some of the UFC fighters, it's they're not a population who's willing to admit that they need help with something, and there's such a facade of confidence, I think, that you need to look confident when you're fighting and going into that octagon. But of course you're going to have doubts and fears. Of course you're worried. Of course you're not normal if you're not. I mean, you're going into a very, very dangerous situation. So for some of them to be able to share how they're feeling sometimes is also, I take it as a great privilege to be a type of person who they feel they can open up to about that stuff, because it's just not something you do in sports sometimes, is to admit to those things,
Right, we've been about an hour and 10 minutes. You got to get back to average workday.
The longer we go, the fewer views we're going to have. So we have to. I'm kidding. All right. Anything else last minute that I didn't touch on, or?
Yeah. So I do this question with everyone right before they sign off, but just kind of what advice do you have to undergrads in kinesiology or even grad students into kinesiology, just how to be successful in the field of kinesiology?
Aim for where you want to be when you're 39 years old. And I think what's happened in today's day and age is, we've gone through periods of, economic wealth, and people from the current college age population grew up always having stuff, kind of expecting things. And it's not their fault that they grew up and that everyone gets a trophy generation at all. It's not. It's societies. They put them through that. But I think what happens then is that even Whitney, with all the success you're going to have in your career, you want it right now, right? You worked hard. You want to make it. You want to be there. You're looking for jobs. You want it right now. That's what I did.
Yeah.
But I wish someone would have said, you know what, when you're 39, you're going to be successful. You're going to be where you want to be. So don't worry about being there right now. You're a lot more likely to put in years of hard work, to deal with setbacks. You're going to maintain confidence when you're not getting jobs. If you think, what is my life going to be like when I'm 39 years old? What type of salary? Who do I want to be with? Where do I want to be? What kind of job? What kind of lifestyle? Because if you think like it like that, you still got another 30 years of work in something, and you've given yourself the time to make the mistakes, to put the dirty work in, to start low, to volunteer, to do all that stuff. And I think too many students, I want to be successful now. I want to run my gym now. I want to have my business now. I want to be in a tenure track position now. I want to be married now. I want to be this lifestyle now. Well, you're going to set yourself up for a lot of failure, and then you're going to get discouraged, and you're going to question yourself, and you're going to want to try other things. But it's just like becoming an Olympic athlete. Because you wanted it at 8 years old doesn't mean you're going to be an Olympian at age 8. Next thing you know, you're 23 years old and you're an Olympian. Because you stayed the course and because you thought long term about it. And man, I just wish students really recognized. You know, when I was in grad school, my brother didn't go to college, got married, bought a house, had kids. My sister didn't go to college, got married, bought a house. Those are all the things I thought I wanted when I was in grad school. And here I was, broke all the time, living in an attic in Massachusetts with no heating or air conditioning. Just, you know what it's like. It sucked. And there were so many days where I thought, oh, I can't wait, I can't wait. Well, you know what? If I could tell myself now, you know what, one of these days you're going to have everything that you thought you wanted at the time. You're going to be fine. I would have been just fine on a day-to-day basis, because it would have meant that this is an investment of something that in time is going to bring me great happiness and contentment. So I tell my students this: plan for what you want your life to be at when you're 39. And I don't know why 39. I know when I was 39, I was pretty damn happy and content and still on the path, but man, I would have probably enjoyed the process more when I was 27, 28, 29, 30. I definitely would have felt a lot better about some of the failures I had, because I knew it wasn't going to be career changing. So that's my best advice. It's not about next year. It's not about 3 years from now. Not even about 10 years from now, depending on how old you are. Aim for that, and you're going to live a very, very rewarding, long life and career. All right?
Thanks for hanging out, Dr. Wiersma.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity very much. Let's go get some views, huh?
Sounds good, man.
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Happy
All right.
birthday, Patrick.
Matt, happy birthday, buddy. All right, I'll see you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.